Hello again, I'm Cecilia Sun from UWA, and this is the second of two videos on the development of the concerto. In the first video, I talked about the concerto in the Baroque and classical eras. If you haven't watched it, there is a link below. In this video, I'll pick up the story of the concerto from around 1800 and take us through to the present day. The concerto came into its own in the 19th century due to the rise of the public concert, the move into larger venues, and the cult of the virtuoso. In the 19th century, there was no dividing line between composers and performers, and many concertos were written for the composer's own use. Notable examples include the Five by Paganini, the violinist who provided the model for the romantic virtuoso, Two for Violin by Wieniawski, and cello concertos by star performers, including David Popper and Bernhard Romberg. The piano, which had changed from the more intimate models Mozart knew to the powerful instrument we have today, was by far the most popular solo instrument, with concertos written by, amongst many others, performer composers Liszt, Chopin, Musicology, and Amy Beach, the first female American composer to write a piano concerto. Aspects of the late 18th century Mozart concerto model and the first movement structure I discussed in the first video endured well into the 19th century and beyond. But there were a number of modifications, including the introduction of the soloist at the beginning, which Beethoven did in his last two piano concertos, connecting all the movements, as Mendelssohn did in his violin concerto, and a general expansion of the form. Brahms' second piano concerto has 4 movements and is about 50 minutes long. Some composers, however, abandoned this traditional form altogether. A comparison between 2 piano concertos by Brahms and Liszt, finished within 1 year of each other, gives us a window into the ongoing 19th century battle between the traditionalists, represented by Brahms here, and the more experimental formal approaches of the new German school, represented here by Franz Liszt. Premiered by the composer himself in 1858, Brahms' first piano concerto has a standard 3-movement form, with the first movement following a classical model, minus the cadenza, that Mozart himself would have recognized. It even follows the opening ritornello solo exposition structure, with the soloist having to wait for 90 bars before coming in. The year before, Franz Liszt had conducted the premiere of his second piano concerto in A minor. In contrast to Brahms, this concerto is in one single continuous movement with 6 distinct sections. As you can see, the allegro ending aside, it doesn't resemble the traditional 3-movement fast, slow, fast form. Moreover, in a characteristically 19th century way, a number of themes recur and are transformed throughout the piece. The 20th century saw a great variety in the concerto form, with a wider range of solo instruments. Styles range from Rachmaninoff's second and third for the piano, which are firmly in the 19th century virtuoso composer model and uses romantic harmonic language, to pieces that show European composers' discovery of jazz, such as Ravel's Piano Concerto, written after the composer visited the United States in 1928, and Stravinsky's Ebony Concerto, premiered in 1946, which is scored for solo clarinet and a jazz band. Alban Berg composed his violin concerto in 1935 and dedicated it, quote, to the memory of an angel. And the angel here is Manon Gropius, Alma Mahler's daughter, who died at the age of only 18. This 2-movement concerto is firmly rooted in the German lineage. It combines the modernist technique of 12-tone composition, which you can ask your teacher about for more information, with quotations from a Bach chorale, complete with Bach's harmonization, and even an Austrian folk song. Some composers deliberately reference the concerto as an archaic form. For example, Soviet composer Alfred Schnittke's first of 6 Concerto Grosso is a polystylistic work, where Baroque elements such as the motivic writing, the titles of some of the movements, and the use of the harpsichord mixes freely with 20th century collage techniques, the use of a prepared piano, and his treatment of dissonance. The violin and the piano have long dominated the concerto form, but 20th and 21st century composers wrote for all available instruments. Gabriel Prokofiev, grandson of Sergei, even wrote a turntable concerto in 2006. And a number of composers, most notably Bartók and Lutosławski, have written concertos for orchestra, which initially sounds like a contradiction in terms, but simply means a piece that highlights the virtuosity of different parts of the orchestra rather than the virtuosity of a soloist or a group of soloists. One aspect of the concerto that has remained constant is the importance of performers to this genre. Most concertos are still written with a specific performer in mind, and performers can, in turn, transform the genre for their instrument. For example, percussionist Evelyn Glennie has had over 50 concertos written for her. So to recap, here are some important terms and concepts you should remember about the concerto. For the Baroque era, remember there are 2 main types, Corelli's Concerto Grosso and Vivaldi's Solo Concerto. And make sure you understand the terms concertino, ripieno, and ritornello. In the classical era, the most important figure was Mozart, whose first movement form combined aspects of the late 18th century sonata form with the Baroque concerto form. In the 19th century, the concerto flourished with the rise of the virtuoso, most notably Paganini on the violin and Liszt on the piano. Some composers, such as Brahms, maintained traditional elements of classical forms, but others, such as Liszt, experimented with more radical structures, and they were doing this at more or less the same time. In the 20th century and beyond, the only sure thing you can say about all concertos is that it is still a piece to showcase virtuosity. There are numerous different formal structures, different structures, different styles, and different solo instruments. I hope this was helpful for your ATAR study and that you enjoy your exploration of the concerto. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy music and you come to study at UWA, you can make music a small part of your degree with 1 or 2 units, or you can do your entire degree in music. You can study many different kinds of music, many different aspects of music, from musicology through to one-on-one lessons with a leading teacher on your instrument. For more details, head to our website, which is linked in the description below.